As of the latest USDA crop progress report, Nebraska was the only state in the country to have completed its soybean planting. Unfortunately, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, severe weather has negatively impacted many growing regions of the state. We talked with UNL Extension plant pathologist Loren Giesler on campus Wednesday. Loren said the weather Nebraska has experienced could lead to problems in some of the state's soybean fields.
Well, yeah, and all the stormy conditions we're having really favoring some seedling diseases in soybeans right now that we're seeing. So when we're looking at those in those fields where they've had any of those conditions, heavy rain events, hail, windstorms, really going to favor, some of our pathogens that are in a lot of fields out there, the Pythiums, the Rhizoctonia, the Fusarium.
Last time we talked a lot about Pythium. It was a lot cooler then. Are we warm enough to be out of the ballpark for that one?
Well, the soils are warming, but still we're seeing some Pythium still come in the lab. So I think in some situations where those beans were out there and because of the cool temperatures staying, we had some Pythium infection that then even after the fact that soil temperatures warm up, we see the beans taken off, and with the storm conditions that favors some infection that way. Now the ones that I see though with these warmer soil temperatures are going to be more common now. I expect to see more Rhizoctonias coming in. I expect to see more on the Fusarium side. Pathogens that are stressed in well-drained soils. Now if we're in fields where we've got those eroded hillsides, more fine textured soils, more clay in the soil, then in those situations we're still going to be dealing with some Pythiums, and then we might even start seeing more Phytophthora, especially with these heavy rain events in some areas.
How do you differentiate between these four diseases, Loren?
Well, I was just talking to our diagnostician this morning, and I think the biggest problem is looking at a picture of those, you just really can't tell most of the time. The only exception is going to be Phytophthora. And Phytophthora is going to have those dark lesions on the outside of the stem that are going to extend from the soil line up. So you'll see that brown discoloration, not to be confused with that purple stem coloration in some of the varieties, but we'll see that. And then also when you split that stem on a younger bean, a lot of times you'll see some dark discoloration on the inside of the stem in the center. So that's the only time you can really feel confident with a diagnosis on that. You can guess, because if you got well-drained soils, most of the time you're going to be dealing with Rhizoctonia, then Fusarium second, and then in the clay soils, Pythiums and Phytophthors, but you'll see them overlap too, just depending on how it goes. So I really encourage the growers to make sure they're getting it identified correctly. If they've got a good agronomist they're working with, a lot of them know how to identify these. If not, and they can't get it confirmed, send it to the Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic.
For mid to late June, if a farmer was hailed out or rained out and decides that he or she does want to go in and replant, should they treat seed before they plant?
Well, if they've had significant disease problems in that field, and that's the reason why they're going to do a replant, if the soil temperatures, are above 60, 60 is optimum for germination. So I'm not too concerned about that. The only exception to that is going to be Phytophthora. If you've got a field with Phytophthora, then I'd make sure you're treating that field because above 60 degrees is still optimum for that pathogen too. So in general, the beans are going to come out quick. You really don't have to treat it. A lot of people say too, because you're going back into a field that had disease, but it's there all the time anyway. But again, it's the stress that's causing it. If you don't have the stress, they're going to come up and be fine, but if it's Phytophthora, make sure you're treating.
Are treatments recommended for standing beans that have confirmed diseases?
Really not. There's no data. Different ones comment on using foliar fungicides and things like that. These early bean fields that are injured, stressed, I would not put that investment in there. There's no data that supports that idea in any way. It makes, it kind of sounds okay because it's going to improve the health and make the beans, supposedly defend themselves, but no data that suggests that's true, especially at these earlier stages. I wouldn't do that. Once we get into R3, those timings where we tend to see some yield advantages, that's when I'd consider those things.
Well, this could be an extreme situation for a lot of Nebraska with the multiple inches of rain we've seen. How do you document this and judge the next time you come in with soybeans whether or not these diseases are going to be there?
Well, you really can't. That's the hard part. Now, the ones that you can, though, if you've had any history at all, and history-wise for replant, probably, when I talk to people, if you've had a stand issue 1 in 4 or 5 years, it's probably significant enough that you're going to want to manage that. So I would just, document it, look back history. If it's new ground to you and you don't know, I would sure treat going into the next year if you're having these problems. And the biggest one though to document is going to be the Phytophthora, because then you can select resistant and tolerant varieties. You can do some things in the fall to start planting that next season in that field.
On our website, we'll link to information on UNL's Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic in case you're interested in submitting samples for analysis of soybean seedling diseases.